Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar put on by Homewood Health on social media and the impact on mental health. My name is Kathy Sisak, and I'm a clinical manager at Homewood Health, and I will be with you this evening presenting tonight's webinar. I'm also joined by Erica McInnes, my colleague, who will be supporting behind the scenes and monitoring the chat box for any questions as well. So we'll be together for about an hour this evening. The webinar goes for about 45 to 50 minutes, and then I'll leave some time at the end for questions. Your cameras and your audio has already been preset to be off during the webinar, so feel free to use the chat box for any questions that do come up. And a recording of this evening's webinar, an audio recording, will be available following the webinar, so you'll be able to access that afterwards. Okay. So I'd like to begin this evening by bringing to mind the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today and the significance of these lands. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people who call these lands home. And to learn more about whose land you are on, I invite you to visit Whose Land at www.whos.land, or you can also download the app, which is available in both English and French. As well, I would like to just acknowledge that in an effort to be trauma-informed, inclusive, and more culturally diverse, we also recognize that social determinants of health oppress members of marginalized groups and may contribute to chronic stress and other health conditions that are not reflective of mainstream culture's experiences. And these health conditions are created by and exist within systems of Eurocentric culture, including but not limited to white, patriarchal, heteronormative, individualistic, and capitalistic systems. And so although the content and the material that I'll be presenting that will follow might not specifically name these systems, we do acknowledge the disproportionate health burden that is placed on marginalized groups as a result of these systems. So in terms of how we'll be spending our time together tonight, the objectives of tonight's webinar are to really increase awareness of the impact of social media on mental health, and to learn to recognize what are some of the signs if social media may be having a detrimental or a negative effect on you or someone you know, and then also to gain strategies to support the healthy use of and interaction with social media. So just for yourself, you can kind of reflect and take a moment just to reflect on where you fall on a scale of 1 to 5. So 1 being not at all, and 5 being extremely on the following statements. And so the first question is, I often have tender, concerned feelings for people less fortunate than me. So that's the question, and you're going to rate yourself on that question. So again, the question is, I often have tender, concerned feelings for people less fortunate than me. You're going to rate yourself from 1 to 5, 1 being not at all, and 5 being extremely. And the second question is, I try to look at everyone's side of a disagreement before I respond. Okay, I try to look at everyone's side of a disagreement before I respond. And again, using that scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not at all, and 5 being extremely. Okay, so the more you agree with statements like these, so the higher your score is, the more that you experience empathy. And so we'll be talking about the role of empathy, and we all have differing degrees of empathy depending on the situation, but how that is connected to social media and how it impacts our individual mental health. So we'll be talking about social media in our current world, looking at some facts and figures related to that, looking at the impact of social media on mental health, recognizing the negative effects of social media, both in ourselves and in others, and then ending with what are some tips and strategies to foster a healthy relationship with social media. So just starting off, if we think about social media today, social media and social media usage is really widespread in today's world. There's many helpful, there's many beneficial purposes, lots of apps and avenues that we can make use of. And social media is here and it's really here to stay. I think most of us can agree. So it's really meaningful and important to dive a bit deeper and explore both the pros and the cons of social media, as well as the effects on our mental health, both good and bad, and to really prepare ourselves with strategies to assist in building and maintaining a healthy relationship with social media. And so that's really what today's session is all about. When we're talking about social media, we're talking about forms of electronic communication, things like websites for social networking, microblogging, through which users create online communities to share various information, ideas, personal messages, and other content, things like videos. And there's lots of purposes for social media, things like just connecting, socially connecting, marketing and advertising, informing, expressing ourselves. So variety of purposes. And there's also lots of different platforms of social media. So Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Twitter, TikTok, and so forth. So before we move on, I'll just invite you to use the chat box and to go back to that idea of what's the purpose of social media. And if you can just use that chat box and you can record what for yourself or for your family members, for friends, what is the purpose that social media might serve in your own life, in addition to some of the ideas that are listed there? This is great. Yeah, so we've got staying connected with family and friends, memes. Yeah, I love memes, learning new things, communicating and sharing information, staying connected, sharing funny memes to friends, communicating, connecting, remaining connected with people from the past. Absolutely. Research, updating my family and friends on what my kids are up to, messaging, sharing common interests, connecting with family that live or work away, entertainment, news and connecting, news, trends, new information, shopping, event sharing, connecting with others in a timely way internationally, absolutely, creating anxiety, recipes, connection to faraway family, comment here about varies for whichever one I'm on, whichever social media platform I'm on, to see what's happening around the world. So lots and lots of different ideas, networking, affirmations, dating, absolutely. So lots and lots of ideas, connecting with groups of different interests, crocheting, traveling, absolutely. So thank you everyone for putting those ideas into the chat box. So lots and lots of purposes for social media. And I know for myself, just thinking, even recently a health member or a family member rather getting a new health diagnosis, first thing I do is go on Facebook. Maybe not the right thing to do, but that's kind of where we are in our time, and looking at different support groups around those health issues, different information, different suggestions, connecting with people with lived experience. And so absolutely social media has, I think, a valuable role to play in helping us get connected, but certainly needing to consider what are the impacts on our mental health as well. So just looking at some facts and figures, so starting from the top, we can see that there's 4.2 billion social media users across the globe. In terms of the average amount of time that users spend on social media each day, we're looking at almost 2.5 hours a day. Messaging, video, and maps are the leading online activities using a mobile device, and Facebook is still the most popular social media platform. Okay, so these numbers are from 2021, so fairly recent. And these days, almost all of us are using social media in one form or another. Just a super convenient way to pull up an app on our phones or tablets or computers, quick to satisfy whatever need, whatever information that we might be looking for in that moment. And so it's almost shocking, really, at this point, if we hear of someone who doesn't have a social media account, right? So it's really something that most of us are quite familiar with. just to consider social media by the minute. So these numbers come from August 2021, so less than a year old. So by the minute, 2 million Snapchat messages are sent. There's 1,500 activities shared by Strava athletes, 856 minutes of webinars hosted on Zoom, 100,000 users connected on MS Teams, 240,000 photos shared on Facebook, 65,000 photos shared on Instagram, 694,000 hours streamed on YouTube, 167 million videos watched by TikTok users, and 575,000 tweets shared on Twitter. And so, you know, just by the minute, you can see sort of how widespread this is and that we're always sort of connected, right? So just for a moment to kind of do a self-compassion check with all of us, with our loved ones, just a gentle reminder that social media is really designed to keep us coming back for more. So there's almost this kind of addictive or reinforcing aspect to social media. And why? So a few reasons, one of them being that it's really a massive revenue generating enterprise for companies. And so platforms and companies really compete for our attention as consumers, and they do so by making aspects of social media so enticing, so convenient, that it draws and locks us in, right? So I'm thinking about Instagram and the reels, and you're just kind of going through and scrolling. There's a lot of appeal. It's entertaining. It kind of keeps us coming back for more. And so just to be self-compassionate, both with yourself and with loved ones in terms of social media use and the role that it plays, okay? To mention here as well, that in terms of that self-compassion check, that social media can also trigger that reward system in our brains. So if we think about our brains and the role that dopamine plays, both with substances, with other pleasurable activities, there's dopamine that goes off and that becomes reinforcing. It's that feel-good chemical in the brain, keeps us coming back for more doing the same activity. And the same is true for social media. So looking now at the impact of social media on mental health. So as with most things in life, social media has both advantages and disadvantages in terms of how it impacts our mental health. Social media can certainly work to benefit and improve our lives or aspects of our lives, but it also does have the potential to become a stressor, to become a burden, to impair our functioning. So if I think about impairing our functioning, impacting what time we go to bed perhaps, or impacting our functioning in terms of instead of doing whatever activity we plan to do, spending that time on social media, so we end up getting behind and so forth. And so in a way, social media does have the potential, or our use and how we interact with social media really does have the potential to exacerbate mental health issues. And it's something that we do need to be aware of for ourselves. This balance has resulted in similar findings when it comes to the impact of social media on mental health. So there's multiple studies and findings that demonstrate that social media can have a positive impact on mental health, but also, not surprisingly, that social media and our use of it can have a negative impact on mental health. And so in the next few slides, we will touch on what are some of those positive and negative aspects of social media on our mental health. What it really comes down to, and what I would encourage you to start reflecting on for yourself, for your loved ones, is it's not about social media being bad or good necessarily, as much as how we interact with it. What is the impact on us? How much time are we spending on social media? What are we using it for? And so we'll talk about that a bit more together. As well, looking at what are healthy habits, really having clear intentions and having a good balance are those keys to having a healthy relationship with social media, and just putting things into place to ensure that your mental health is not negatively impacted by your social media use. Okay, so we'll get more into some of those tips and strategies a little bit later. So if we just start by what are some of the positive impacts of social media on mental health and well-being, and these are a lot of the things that you mentioned in the chat just a few minutes ago. So social media has been shown to support and increase both connection and belonging. So thinking certainly about the last 2 years being in a global pandemic, being quite isolated at times. And so social media in some ways has really helped in that sense to keep us connected with others. It can also trigger the reward center of the brain, which I discussed. So releasing that dopamine, making people feel good. It can provide purpose and meaning to individuals and groups based on commonalities. So you may have a certain interest and there's nobody in your household, nobody in your workplace, nobody in your community that you know of that has that interest. So being able to connect with individuals who have like-minded interests, for example. Being useful in providing a safe space online to share mental health challenges and seek support from peers. So being able to have an account that's specific to, for example, a certain issue or certain health issue, certain mental health issue, whatever it might be, and being able to connect with people that way. It has shown that it improves outcomes related to depression as a result of having strong and safe online communities. So private groups, being able to connect with people who have lived experience and being able to tap into that wisdom and that connection. And then finally, being able to educate, unite, and motivate individuals in healthy and positive ways. Okay, so when looking at this list, it's interesting to recall the dimensions of well-being and wellness. And so when we think about our aspects of wellness, we think about 6 different dimensions for all of us. So there's spiritual, social and community, intellectual, psychological, emotional, nutritional, and physical. So kind of those 6 areas for each of us that make up our overall health and wellness. Typically, there's some areas at a moment in time that we're stronger in, and there's going to be certain areas that we're maybe not as strong in at a certain moment in time. And so it's easy to see that there's a high degree of interconnectedness and positive correlation with many of those 6 dimensions that I mentioned. And social media really does have the potential, the capacity to contribute to our mental health and well-being in a positive way. While social media has really exponentially grown in popularity over the years as a whole, it's become an extremely important and almost essential tool during the pandemic, as I mentioned, really giving us that ability to keep in touch with family and friends. And then practical things too, like grocery orders and so forth, having online deliveries and so forth, being able to obtain information as well. So just recognizing what are the negative impacts on mental health and well-being. And so if we sort of switch gears to this, you can see that this list is almost opposite of all the positive impacts. And really it comes down to how we use and how we interact with social media. It's getting kind of to that sweet spot where there's that fine line between enjoying and sort of reaping the benefits of social media, but then starting to become negatively affected by social media use as well. So these particular negative impacts that are listed here about really decreasing emotional wellness, lower satisfaction in interpersonal relationship, decreased sleep, increased feelings of stress, anxiety, depression, and loneliness, decreased self-esteem and morale, leading to addiction, perhaps self-absorption, starting to use social media as an unhealthy coping mechanism, and then really increasing disconnection and division. So I think about trolling online or that kind of thing that it can kind of contribute to that as well. And so these particular negative impacts are attributed to what we could consider as being unhealthy use of an interaction with social media. And among other corresponding and or resulting negative events and impacts, they can be further worsened by having skewed or unrealistic perceptions of reality. So if you think about looking at certain social media accounts, everybody's kind of maybe posting pictures of their vacations and their renovations, and sort of things look really, really optimal and ideal. But just recognizing that that's a small sliver of reality, right? And so when we're only paying attention to that small sliver where everything looks sort of utopian and ideal, if we compare perhaps our own situation, our own lives, our own suffering, our own stresses, it can contribute to a negative impact on our own mental health, right? By only sort of recognizing those highlight reels of people's lives and comparing our own lives to that, for example. And so if we start to sort of recognize the negative effects of social media, and in particular recognize the impact that it has on our on our mental health. And so what I would encourage you to do is the next time that you're on social media, perhaps tonight or tomorrow or whenever, is just to check in with yourself about, how's my mood, how am I feeling, where are my thoughts at, perhaps before you go on social media, checking in with yourself, kind of checking your vitals, so to speak, while you're using social media, while you're scrolling, and then also after. Just really using that skill of mindfulness, of tapping in, recognizing, sort of tuning into yourself. Okay, what's going on with me as I'm interacting with this social media platform, right? Noticing in yourself any feelings of sadness or stress or anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, or that sense of feeling really drained after being on social media. Noticing if there's any difficulty identifying and defining personal goals. Noticing if you're comparing yourself with others, and those pervasive feelings of envy, jealousy, and any experience of sort of real life self-image and body image are viewed with negativity and criticism, or feelings about guilt about what or how often you share. Okay, so just invite you to make that time to check in with yourself about, okay, what's going on with me as I'm interacting with social media. And so in addition to recognizing impact on mental health, linked to that is our behavior, right? So key signs that social media might be negatively impacting our mental health or the mental health of someone that we know could be things like isolation behaviors. So you notice, for example, that you're spending more time online, you're having less quality or in-person time with people close to you. So let's say you don't show up for social plans, or you say that you're going to meet up with a neighbor to chat or do some kind of activity and you kind of don't do that. Or if you're the type of person that is, part of some kind of social group or going to the gym or what have you, going for a walk with someone, you're starting to do that less and less and spending that time on social media. Just paying attention to that, noticing any changes in your behavior related to social media. Living with social media at the forefront of everything that you do. So if it becomes a real habit that you've always got your social media open, you're kind of constantly checking it, just paying attention to that type of behavior. Noticing for yourself if you post something and how important it is to you that you want people to like or follow or engage with you on social media to feel good about yourself. So say, for example, you make a post or you put up some photos and you don't get a like for some hours, or you don't get a like at all, right? Just noticing what's the impact on yourself when that sort of thing happens. And then noticing for yourself any issues with impulse control, right? So do you find it difficult not to check your phone? Do you feel that you're sort of addicted to your phone, having your phone by your side all the time? Can you do an experiment with yourself and not keep your phone beside you for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour or something like that? And then just noticing that sense of that FOMO, or fear of missing out, right? If you don't check your Instagram or your Facebook or TikTok or WhatsApp or whatever it is that you like to use, do you kind of have that sense of, oh my gosh, I haven't been on here for an hour or a day. What have I missed, right? And then if we think about behavior and our daily functioning, all the things that we do to take care of ourselves, to take care of our family, our friends, our homes, noticing if some of those things start to go on the back burner, and really deprioritizing self-care. So things like physical activity, sleep, mindfulness, noticing things like, am I late for an appointment or for a phone call because I've been on social media, or whatever the case may be, okay? And so spending some time now on how do we navigate the use of social media in a way that contributes to our lives, in a way that adds value to our lives, adds joy to our lives, and really contributes to our mental health overall. And so the main categories that we'll be exploring today when it comes to fostering a healthy relationship with social media, having a healthier use of and engagement with social media, are meaning and boundaries, looking at what we can control when we use social media, and then looking at some additional tips and strategies. So the first thing is to really consider, and this was sort of highlighted in our discussion in the chat box earlier, but really reflecting on what social media means for you. So I invite you to sort of consider that for yourself now, but really considering what is social media's purpose in your day-to-day life. Getting clear on what it represents for you and how it serves you in your daily life in view of your lived experience. So, how it serves you, taking into account your culture, your family relationships. And by getting clear on what social media means to you, it's going to assist in guiding your use and your engagement with social media in a way that serves and benefits you, your wants, and your needs. Okay. Another consideration here is honoring and respecting what social media means for other people, because it's not always going to be the same meaning for you. So, for example, if you're in a romantic relationship, your partner might not want to share certain aspects of your relationship. And so it's important to get clear on what works and doesn't work for each of you, how each of you are using social media, how that impacts your relationship, and so forth. Okay. And so boundaries, and I'll throw this question out to the group as well. Um, are there any boundaries that you set for yourself in terms of your use with social media? And so I just invite you to put that into the chat box now. When we think about boundaries, boundaries are sort of those rules that we put in for ourselves that will sort of keep us disciplined and set some rules around how little or how much we use social media, what types of social media we use, when we use it, when we don't, and so forth. And so something to consider when thinking about boundaries in social media is really, it's going to be unique for every single person, right? And so what does a healthy relationship with social media look like for me? What content do I enjoy or not enjoy? Who do I follow? Who do I not follow, and why? So I'll just take a peek and see if anybody has added some comments here. So just boundaries around using social media. Okay, so boundaries around what I share, right? Putting the phone away 1 hour before bed, deleting certain apps or removing them from the main page of the phone. Putting do not disturb on the phone means that you're not going to check or respond in the middle of the night. Big boundary is no pictures of family on open profiles, absolutely. Okay, no social media before bed, 1 to 2 hours cutoff. Being present when with others, so not using social media. Putting time limits on the phone or limited people who I follow, not reading the comments, not following celebrities or fits pro influencers, disabling notifications, putting on time limits and do not disturb. Okay, so again, around time limits, apps are closed until intentionally using it. Removing people who cause me stress or drama, putting my phone on, sleep during the night. Okay, not checking social media when you're with your daughter, absolutely. Okay, being mindful about what's being shared, so nothing personal, careful about sharing information about others as well. Okay, not engaging in debates online. Okay, and going for a walk without the phone. Okay, great ideas. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the other aspect when we think about our use of social media is kind of this circle of what is with our control, what is within our control, and what is not within our control. So as with life and lots of aspects of life, there are certain things that we can control and certain things that we cannot control. And the same is true for social media. So just like the visual on the slide suggests, the things that we actually can control or influence are typically smaller in number or in quantity than the things outside of our control. And that's where our focus plays a really key role. And so I'll invite you to consider now thinking about social media and your use of social media and how you want to use social media. What is actually within your control? It's valuable to consider what are the things that we can control and to focus on that circle while learning to live with those over which we have less or no control. And so if we think about social media specifically, the things that we don't have control over are what others post on social media, how often others are posting or sharing, and others. But the things that we do have control over, or the things that we have some influence, are being intentional about our social media usage. And so that relates to a lot of the comments that you shared about what apps we use, when we use them, for how long we use them, when we don't use them, and so forth. And also unfollowing or muting content that leaves us feeling down, feeling less than, and so forth. Okay. And so other ideas for the circle of influence and what you can control is really setting time limits for social media apps, taking breaks from social media. So many of you have probably seen people posting on their Facebook or on their Instagram saying, I'm taking a social media break for a week or a month or what have you, right? And celebrities doing the same thing. And so taking a break from social media, seeking support, setting expectations for what you're posting. And so posting something when it feels genuine. And trying to not worry as much about what are other people's perceptions of what you're posting, about how many likes you're going to get, and so forth. And so just in considering some additional tips and strategies in terms of how we interact with social media, we really want to be intentional when we're opening and logging into social media and when engaging online. Almost doing a check-in with yourself before logging in to ask yourself, okay, what's my purpose for logging in right now? Why am I doing this, right? Is it for entertainment? Is it to procrastinate? Is it to avoid doing a task that I really don't want to feel like doing right now? Is it to get information? Just being, I think, honest and almost leveling with yourself. Okay, why am I logging in right now, right? What's my need? And there isn't anything wrong with logging in for entertainment per se, or for fun, or for joy, or for information. But I think just being honest and recognizing if we're logging in for things that possibly could impact our mental health in negative ways. So if we're logging in to avoid, as I mentioned, or to procrastinate, but that's when we sort of want to get curious about what we're doing and what's the impact that it's having on us. What's the need that I'm trying to fill by logging in that moment? Being curious about, could my need be satisfied in a healthier or in a more fulfilling way, right? So say I'm feeling really anxious about a task that I'm avoiding. Say I've got a phone call that I need to make and feeling kind of anxious about it, and want to soothe that anxiety, soothe myself in some way. So certainly, numbing yourself on social media is one way, but is there another way to soothe myself, to soothe that anxiety in that moment? Asking yourself when it comes time to posting, if you like to post, is this content that I'd like to post, is it authentic? Is it genuine to who I am? Is it appropriate? And then, as I mentioned, unfollowing or muting accounts that leave you feeling down, less than, overwhelmed, irritated, lonely, envious, and so forth. And just to note that if you do mute accounts, it will not notify the user that you've muted them, right? But it at least allows you to control sort of what's coming on your feed, or what information is coming your way. So some additional tips and strategies as well are removing apps from your devices and turning off notifications, okay? Taking breaks in social media cleanses, as I mentioned, and setting limits on your screen time, or scheduling time to use social media and times to step away. So I have a family member, for example, and a number of you mentioned this, that she's very disciplined, that after she has supper, she puts her phone on airplane mode and she does not use any social media after supper. And really, she'll watch TV, she'll read, but she's really been quite disciplined about not using any social media after supper. That really works for her. So considering, what are your unique needs? What are your preferences? What might work for you? There's ways on your phone as well where you can limit how much time you've spent as well. And so an alert will come on saying, you've come up to whatever you've set your limit to be for that day, an hour and a half, 30 minutes, whatever it is for you. So you can also set a limit on your phone. Supporting and connecting with others. So trying to continue having that face-to-face or that phone contact with others. So not allowing social media to replace those interpersonal relationships and connections with others. And then as well, when we think about online bullying and trolling and all that sort of stuff, just noticing for yourself, trying to be uplifting and kind, reminding yourself, if you wouldn't say it in person, not to say it online either. Okay. And so I'll just pause here for a moment and encourage you to reflect for yourself if there's any changes that you can make to your social media habits. If you feel comfortable to share those changes, I'll invite you to put them in the chat as well. So things that not too easy, not too hard, but things that you would be interested in putting into place to change your own social media habits. It could be how much time you're spending on social media or when you're using social media, but any changes that you'd like to make in terms of your own relationship, your own interaction with social media. Okay, so some ideas coming in here, and I invite you to borrow from the ideas of others and sort of use the wisdom of the group here. So some of the ideas in terms of changing habits with social media are about reviewing all the groups I'm part of and purging the ones I don't pay attention to anymore. Yeah, great idea. Checking in with my intention and purpose for opening an app before I mindlessly engage and scroll through content. Removing individuals that I truly don't interact with, limiting friends in quotation marks. No one has 1,000 friends for sure. Limiting amount of time allowed at any point, and getting to that point where I don't just reach for my phone when I'm bored, putting the phone away more often, being more present. Okay, setting a time limit on the length of time spent on Facebook or others, not checking the phone first thing in the morning. So many apps on my phone that I don't use in the end. I just like to make the decision just to delete them for sure. Setting the sleep boundary, not using it when I'm as a distraction when I'm bored, and actually visiting close friends instead of going online. Okay, yeah. And another comment here about not using social media when laying in bed. Okay, so considering sort of what are some of those things that you might want to put into place. I know there's some households where they'll say, okay, at mealtime, everybody puts their phone in a basket, or I've even heard of some teachers inviting the class and making a contract with the students in the class. Okay, we'll all walk in and we'll put our phones in the basket so we can all be sort of present together during this 1 hour class. So trying to put some of those things into place, some of those disciplines. So in terms of where you can learn more about social media use, there's a lot of different options. In terms of books, there's some listed there, and I'll leave this up for a moment, but there's a few titles, one around digital minimalism, choosing a focused life in a noisy world. There's How to Break Up Your Phone by Catherine Price, and then Offline, Freeing Your Mind from Smartphone and Social Media Stress by Imran Rashid and Soren Kenner. On Netflix, there's the documentary The Social Dilemma. There's also Social Media and Mental Health, which is a PBS TV program, and the link is available there online if you'd like to take it down. And then finally, there's the National Day of Unplugging Awareness campaign, and the website is listed there for you as well to use. Okay. So I'll just pause here for now to see if there's any questions or thoughts, and I'll do the same in a few minutes when I get to the end of the presentation. But if there are any questions or thoughts, please feel free to put them in the chat as well. Okay, so a few comments coming. Okay, so somebody has watched The Social Dilemma and said it's a good one. Thanks for that. Yeah, talking with closest friends about how much I value having real-time connection rather than see what I've been up to in posts. Absolutely. Okay. A comment here from a parent saying that they're not on social media themselves, but they're here to learn about the effects on mental health with regards to grown children. Other family members tuning in as well and relating to some of the information. Someone asking me if I can go back one slide for sure. Let's see, there we go. Yeah, good question. Are there any social media platforms that we believe give a positive effect on mental health. So I think it, comes down to really not necessarily the platform itself. If I think about Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp, TikTok, but really about what's the content that you're viewing, why are you viewing it, and what's the actual impact on your own mental health. So what are the types of Facebook groups that you're part of, for example? Who are you following on Instagram? So I think it's less about the platform itself, but more about what's the content that you're engaging with on that platform, and then noticing for your own self, what's the impact on my mental health? How do I feel? How does this impact my behavior when I'm engaging with it? Okay. What's the youngest age people will start on social media? I mean, I don't know the exact age, but I know that elementary school children are starting on social media. I know as young as grade 1 that they're messaging each other as soon as they're able to start writing, learning how to write. So I have seen that as young as grade 1. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So just a reminder in terms of services available through Homewood Health. So Homewood Health is a proud lead partner in the Wellness Together initiative through Health Canada. So this is in partnership with Kids Help Phone and Stepped Care Solutions, and Homewood Health is delivering a full range of free mental health counseling and support to people of all ages across the country. This initiative is funded by Health Canada, and it's available in both English and French. There's a number of ways to access the services, both through the online portal and website, and it can also be accessed by calling 1-866-585-0445. So again, this is available to all people in Canada. And then in terms of Homewood Health, you can call into 1-800-663-1142 to speak with someone at the Client Services Center, also available in French. And if you're a customer contact and have any questions or specific needs that you'd like help addressing, you can reach out to the account representative who supports you or your team, or you can certainly call the 1-800 number as well. So in the next few slides, I'll just leave up the references for a few minutes if anybody would like to have a look at them. And I'd like to thank you all for joining this evening's webinar. I'll just open up the chat box again if anybody has any questions that they'd like to pose, if you can just include them in the chat box. Yeah, so really good comment here that this extends to gaming platforms such as Xbox and PlayStation. Absolutely. Yeah, great point. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. Okay. Question about what can school boards do to educate students better about social media? Yeah, I think that's a really excellent question. I think social media and the use of social media is part of overall health education. So when we think about as communities, as parents, as schools, educating young people, talking with them in the same way that we would about how do we take care of our mental health, our physical health, in the same way social media needs to be included in there. Talking about what are the ways, what are the safe, I think safety needs to be addressed a lot in terms of students. So what are the safe ways to engage with social media? What are some red flags with social media? If you have any concerns, who are safe adults in a student's life that they can reach out to connect with for support if they have any concerns. Yeah, great question. Okay, there's a comment here. I'm not familiar with this. Thank you for posting it. Use White Hatter to come and educate young people. So I'm not familiar with this resource, but I'll certainly have a look, and thank you for sharing it with the group. Okay, someone asking to see slide 6 again, so I can go back. There we go. Okay. Okay, so the same person who recommended White Hatter said that their school used them to educate students and parents. Yeah, thank you. Comment about the importance of educating children, and related to the previous commenter, parents, about safety as someone who works yeah, in the field. Yeah, the risks with using social media. Okay, a comment about whether there should be a government media agency to manage social media, as with the CRTA for radio and television. Okay, comment about, or question, do you think that the focus on mental health, which is needed, has in some ways compromised the resiliency of our youth? Um, okay, and then a question about going to slide 7, so I'll just do that now while I answer that question. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think that that a focus on mental health compromises resilience of youth and of all of us in general. I think you know, when I think of resiliency, it's about that, our ability to bounce back from hardship, from trauma, from suffering. And so I think that um, when we think about resiliency, it's about what are all the things that we have in our life, the supports, the things that we do in our life, the activities, how we take care of ourselves, who we can reach out to support, that actually, I think talking about mental health and talking about resiliency have a mutually beneficial impact on each other. Yeah, is what I would, what is my take on it. Okay, great question. Any suggestions for someone who works in social media? It seems I'm constantly taking in social media for work or pleasure, and it's hard to take breaks. Yeah, great point. So if you're a person who's working in social media, and how do you take a break? And I'll put that out to the group as well if there's any suggestions from the group about if your job requires you to be on social media. For part or for a lot of it, how do you also take breaks? How do you manage that? I mean, some of my thoughts are on that are to I would say put breaks into your day. So if you work an 8-hour day, for example, make sure you're taking time away from the screen, away from social media, whether that's making a phone call or doing a small walk, whether you're at home or in the office. Might be scheduling time during your day to be doing things other than being on social media. It might be during your work week in the evenings, for example, limiting how much social media, if you can, that you do on your own personal time, and maybe doing some more of that on the weekend if it's something that you enjoy, given that you've spent a good part of your day on social media. So maybe having some boundaries for work days versus weekends in terms of how much you're using social media. So that might be some ideas, and we can see what comes from the group as well. Really good question. Thanks for asking that. So a question about how does social media impact a student's life and trying to figure out their personality while growing up. Yeah, great question. So, I mean, we know that young people are impressionable, and there's a certain innocence there. And so, I think, like the presentation we've talked about tonight, I think social media has the potential to positively impact young people, but certainly there's some risks there as well if they're sort of comparing themselves to others, if they're unrealistically comparing themselves to others as well. And so I think it's about sort of having that healthy balance, talking with young people about their use of social media, healthy ways of using social media, unhealthy ways of using social media, and then also just talking with young people in your life, whether it's your kids or family members or you know, important young people in your life, students perhaps, about, what are the signs that they would have for themselves that social media is having a negative impact in their life, right? So trying to kind of elicit that conversation with them. So how would a young person know that social media is causing some difficulty for them in their life? What would be the red flags in their own life about how social media is impacting them? And what are the other important aspects in their life, so that social media isn't kind of the number one thing in their life, but making sure that there's other things that are meaningful, enjoyable, interesting to them, that they're spending their time and energy on as well. Okay, question about going back to slide 4 and 5 for sure. So here's 4 and I'll go to 5 in a second. So does any of the research look at longer term health impacts, or is that research underway? Yeah, great question. So the research that was presented in tonight's presentation is all from the last couple of years. So I would think that with the use of social media just exploding in the last few years, there will be research on longer term impacts as well, would be my guess. Yeah. Yes, if you will receive a link for the recording of tonight's session. Okay, so some resources being shared. Yeah, good, great point. Conversations like this are great. We need to set an example as a parent, absolutely. Yeah, so yeah. Putting our phone away, paying attention to our kids, paying attention to our family members, absolutely. So comment here about, as an educator assistant, needing more technology for language translation when working with new students from abroad. So it reduces use of our personal phone, and believing that it would limit the urge to check their phone. Yep. Okay. There was a question about social media addiction and what Homewood Health provides. So what I would encourage, if that's a question, and just the impact of social media, definitely calling into the Client Services Center. You'd be able to connect with an intake counselor. And then depending on that person's situation, what's the impact that social media is having on their life, on their mental health, on their functioning, the intake counselor will be able to guide you and talk with you about what are some of the programs and services that might be available to you. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to pause here for now. I'll go to slide 5 actually, because somebody had asked for that. So I will pause here for now. Thank you again for your participation. Really appreciate everybody's engagement and discussion and questions and comments. I'll hang on for a couple of minutes. So if you do want to ask any other questions, I'll be available for that. And I wish you all a good evening, and thank you again for your participation. There's just a question about copy of the slides. So the slides are not provided, but an audio recording of the webinar is. question about if the webinar will be hosted again. And so there are other dates. There is also the possibility of sharing the link to the audio recording for anyone who is interested. So the audio link with the recording will be shared following this evening's webinar. Okay, so I will end the webinar for everyone. Thank you again for your participation and have a wonderful evening.